Good day, everyone. Welcome. Matt Sykes here with Verify. As Jim just set the table here for us, we're going to be covering Zoom Cradle-to-Grave reporting that is now supported in Verify version 16.4. But first, I just kind of want to take a step back for a second or two. And for those of you keeping score at home, maybe what is kind of the Cradle-to-Grave reporting, or what is that kind of mention, and what is that logic from Verify? So it's certainly something that we've had support, as Jim made mention, when call manager for years, most certainly. But it's also embedded into the newer offerings like well now Zoom, but MS Teams and our WebEx calling certainly supported it as well. It's sequence-based reporting. So just to give you kind of a quick little background as an example here in this lab system that I'm in here, I'm in a call manager platform here, just vetting some data very briefly here. But if I wanted to, I can export results or in a report call upon this logic to go ahead and utilize this, well, what's labeled in this lab as start to finish, but this is the Cradle-to-Grave section here. Now, there's terminology differences there. We can certainly talk about that, and I will make mention of that in a couple of moments. But essentially, what the Cradle-to-Grave reporting, and I have a report output here for Call Manager that I can kind of key off of. What it is Verify understands that there's no multiple call records within a call sequence. So as an example from Call Manager here, here's a call sequence example using Cradle-to-Grave reporting logic out of Verify for Call Manager data, where we can see an external call calling in over a SIP circuit, hitting a Unity handler, and coming down to a Hunt pilot to be answered. So this is what the Cradle-to-Grave logic is. It's sequence-based reporting, so that we stitch call records together that we know are related to one another, so that we can provide a full call flow experience that can be leveraged and identified of where all the transfers, ebbs and flows, and forwards and overflows are being routed to. So essentially, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, we've had it for Call Manager for some time. As an example, yeah, so it's a wrench that's kind of embedded into the history exports or into the report exports as well. Right here is the second from the left bottom wrench. Now, previously in Verify 16.3, if we're talking about Zoom, so in that same instance, it's been missing for a while. So between history details, excuse me, and report delivery should be that Cradle-to-Grave kind of wrench there. It is here now, and I certainly have a lab that has Verify 16.4 running on it, so we can certainly entertain the Cradle-to-Grave logic there. Now, I do want to make one quick mention before we dive deep here. Is just that in some environments, I guess the labeling of Cradle-to-Grave can be, taken, may not come across the ear that well. Let's just say. So in the settings within Verify, underneath the system section in the application settings, you do have the option to go ahead and modify that said labeling. Now, in this lab that I'm going to utilize here, or the other one is going to be calling it Cradle-to-Grave, but do know that this can be relabeled. In the other lab, I think it was labeled as start to finish. But if this is a little morbid sounding, again, you can certainly kind of change that terminology and Verify. So it's a little easier on the eyes and on the ears. So that being said, let's dive back into this lab that I have here now, right over here. Too many tabs open. So we'll start out the history section. So underneath call analytics reporting, which is where I always like to take people to, into the history section. The history section for the corresponding platforms that we do support is going to serve us as a kind of a quick search or a lookup, if you will. Now, you'll definitely have advantage of the search criteria or filters within Verify to go ahead and leverage whatever data components you want. We definitely have a default search filter or criteria here as well that can be changed as well underneath the user profile or the global level. We can talk about that later if that's of consequence. But what we can do is I'll quick search something here. I'll just go pattern based with wildcards using the default field of color number, starting with about 6 wildcards or better for the current day. We'll go ahead and render some data here. I've got over 1,000 calls. Let's simplify this. I'll exclude the zeros. There we go, a couple hundred. Okay, so let me zoom out. No pun intended there. So in the history section here, as before Verify 16.4, certainly people can vet the Zoom data in here, but there's going to be call records that are related to one another, where there's call queues, there's common areas, there's department transfers, there's overflows, there's a lot of that going on, including calls to the auto attendants and the receptionists as well. So before Verify 16.4, you wouldn't be able to, it was pretty much just a line by line item. Sure, you could call upon, I suppose, what is it, the the identifiers, if you will, from the data set to go ahead and leverage them to see if potentially they may be related to one another, but we didn't have the advantage of kind of stringing them together automatically. So it's kind of a manual process and maybe not the most ideal. And let me save that right there. So again, yeah, we could look at the IDs, but again, stitching those together would be a little laborious for someone to go ahead and do. Now in Verify 16.4, we do have the advantage of, again, now whether it's in a report or in this history section, the advantage to be able to go ahead and leverage this Cradle-to-Grave option. Now, as like all the other platforms, it'll be sitting here waiting to be turned on. Once we do turn it on, it will incorporate all that the backend identifiers being matched and built and stitched together in the sequencing and the output, which we'll get to. But also we have the advantage of also creating tertiary summary summary sections of output on the report output, which we'll get into as well. So let's just, for this rudimentary quick ad hoc search for mainly probably inbound traffic, because I think I have 4-digit internal DNs in this lab. Just going to go ahead and run a quick HTML export here. And if this lab is having a decent afternoon, it should finish pretty reasonably for me here. Okay. So for these 171 calls, here's a quick, very rudimentary kind of an export here. So the lay of the land here from this export model should look very familiar to those that utilize the Verify reporting. But very high level here. Here's the filter I threw together for these 171 calls. It is going to list out the very granular nature and detail of all of these 171 calls, as it did previously. But now we have the advantage of having the last most right furthest column here in the detail of related calls. Those of you keeping score at home and that are familiar with the Cradle-to-Grave reporting that we've always supported for call manager, let's say, this should look pretty apparent and recognizable. Now, what we have the advantage of on is being able to look row by row on these details and see, are there other calls that are related to one another? Now, I ran the search filter pretty wide open, so it should be grabbing everything for the current day so far. So I probably will see some replications of the same phone numbers here that are dialing of the inbound variety. I'm going to focus on inbound solely because the outbound from the Zoom platform is not going to know, well, at least the Zoom system's not going to know about any transferings and ebbs and flows and hops on another platform for the outbound dialing. So primarily it's going to be leveraged for the inbound stuff or internals, let's say. So focusing on inbound traffic here. But we can see here on the furthest most right column here, what's related to this one call, from this external number that ends with 1334 to this 5100 number to Selena, it looks like, in the finance department. So we can go ahead and click on this link right here. It will shoot us down the report all the way down to the sequencing section. So this should look a little familiar to what I just showed with the call manager report a handful of minutes ago. But essentially what we can do is see what's going on with the sequence. How many transfers were handled, how did the call come in, the call was presented initially to an auto attendant before it was passed off to a call queue, and then from the call queue it probably broadcast to a handful of users that probably have some not connected kind of record references, if you will. But certainly we'll also be able to flag and go ahead and identify the user in this case, which was Selena Gibbs, that did answer this call and handle it for just short of a minute. So this is going to provide us provide us and you the level of granular reporting so that we can see exactly what's all taking place with these calls. Now, while I don't maybe have the data to back it up at the moment, but definitely for like a lot of a lot of call queue stuff where maybe if one call queue, if the group of agents don't answer the broadcast, ring down in a decent manner of time, I'm sure there's a threshold on that, where we would overflow to say CQ number 2 and kind of, et cetera, et cetera. So there can be certainly plenty of those, forwardings or overflows that are baked in here. All of those should be certainly stitched together in these sequences that we're looking at. Because essentially at the end of the day, every one of these sequences is just one call. While certainly it's reaching out and tapping into multiple users or auto attendants or places within the Zoom infrastructure, we should be able to stitch all that together and provide it to you in a very readable format like you're looking at here. Now, there's certainly going to be different needs and use cases for this stuff. Again, I just ran this one pretty wide open just for inbound traffic for the current day, and it's pretty much show me everything, if you will. And that's essentially what it should do in a pretty ad hoc functionality, which is what I pretty much called upon from the history section here. Now, don't get me wrong, in the report section where the reports are structured and built out and then set for automation pretty shortly, we can also even call upon that. I'll just pick on one of these here, that it will be apparent to be loaded in very reasonably. Oh, it was tricking my eyes. Here it is. So the Cradle-to-Grave section is going to be baked in here. So it's in the reports, it's in the history exports as well. But let's play around with this history export a little more. So we can also even again, call upon different things. So there's definitely the filterable options that we're going to have. So if maybe I'm only looking for certain departments, yes, we definitely have leverage for for the departments. If I'm looking for the call queues, definitely we have lookups for those pretty easily. So we're reading the API for all those in our sync files. So pretty easy to go ahead and assemble that. Now, why is the cradle to grave stuff important? It's important if there's oddities that are happening. Now, definitely, I'm going to keep harping on call manager, but for call manager data, I mean, I can't state how many times I've caught some oddities in customer system routings or overflows or maybe dead hunt groups that aren't set up properly, and there's no complaints that are coming down the way, or maybe there's cause for concern of there was a harassing call that came in, and they said something to the receptionist that um, was potty mouth, let's just say, and then maybe the call was forwarded off, or et cetera, or maybe they dialed in over an auto attendant, and then kind of the same similar nature. So maybe we don't have much to go on, but we know HR or legal or management wants to know exactly who's calling, where they're calling to, based off of this phone number. This is definitely certainly something you can take advantage of. So plugging in that number right here, running an export, maybe turning on that cradle to grave logic, so that again you can kind of peer through pardon me, you can peer through the reporting result outputs and see exactly, what has happened to these calls, where are those calls going, where is this repeat caller calling into. So if there's no cause for concern, definitely that's what this is very advantageous for. Yes, while this is maybe a little down the rabbit hole, let's just say, the value add is certainly significant here for sure. Because again, it's not just okay. Instead of just looking at these two calls as just being, two individual call legs that we can report on, we do stitch them together to kind of give you that ebb and flow and kind of that full call flow experience. So it's essentially what is the intended value add here behind the scenes here. Now, again, whether calls are coming in these examples here of the inbound variety, hitting call queues or hitting departments, you'll be able to easily see these. Now, in my lab here, I'll zoom in for a second. Again, no pun intended. Definitely have a lot of columns in the detail section here. You don't necessarily need to leverage all of these. Now, I'm just doing this for the demonstration purposes for this session here. Now, there are plenty of fields and columns that you can certainly call upon. Again, you don't necessarily need all of these, but there's definitely going to be ones that are going to be of good use, let's say. Now, perhaps maybe the caller called results, the call scenario types, and the called party names and types as well. So whether we can easily identify that these are going to call queues, or they're going to users, or they're going to places, or they're going to common areas, those are going to be very advantageous to see in the raw data. So again, these can be exported. Now, this is probably something that's not going to be ran that frequently, unless there's need for it. Now, the need for it could certainly also be, running it in a manner where we actually want to maybe call upon actually a cradle to grave search set. So as an example for these 171 calls, I don't know, I will pick on maybe 3 different departments as an example. Let's go ahead and jump into the cradle to grave wrench here with already having, again, pretty much an inbound filter is what this is. I have 4-digit internal directory numbers in my lab here. So the calling party number, if it were to equal 4, pardon me, if we were to start with just one single character, it would also include all my internals. So I don't want that. So I just want to mainly look at my inbounds from the external world. So what this is doing here is it's get a filter off of the inbound calls. And then for the cradle to grave, I'm going to turn that on because I want that all stitched together. And then go ahead and turn on some additional kind of search set functionality. So as an example, I know that in those data outputs, pardon me. Oh, I love breadcrumbs. Let's go with the finance department. I'm going to go ahead and create a couple different cradle to grave search sets. So in addition to being able to see all the granular nature of all those calls stitched together like we just did, we will have the opportunity to then also, again, create tertiary output sections as well in the report for content that you deem necessary. I'm just going to pick on some departments. For other people, it could certainly be based off of certain numbers or certain auto receptionists or auto attendants or even common areas. I'd probably lean on common areas myself. Just don't have the data in my lab here to support it. But as an example here, so we want to know about calls that came in for the current day into the finance department and see all their ebbs and flows and the stitching of all those calls. But I'll build on maybe 2 others. Maybe I'll do one for human resources, and I'm going to use the call department past tense because these are going to be where the call ends up of the inbound variety is going to be at a called past tense recipient department. So let's see, human resources, and I'll maybe do one more. Let's go with maybe retail sales. Again, I love breadcrumbs. Let's go with call department. Let's go ahead and add that on in there. Retail. There we are. So in this report output, again, just very rudimentary, is thrown together on the fly here. My search set is mainly keying off of all inbound traffic, and I've turned on the Cradle-to-Grave logic, but then I also told the report output that I want to also see for the total statistics for these, for this whole report for the inbound variety for today. I also want to know how many calls are going to these three different departments. Now, these are good search sets to have, but also we'll definitely need, and I do this pretty regularly myself, I forget to turn this toggle on. When we turn this toggle on, then it offers us that additional output section of the into the report. Now, I don't think we're going to need to see my filters, these guys right here in the body of that section, so I'm going to go ahead and suppress them. Probably similar with this one as well. Don't need to see those. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. Okay, so but for the section here for the Cradle-to-Grave summary section, I'm going to actually add in maybe some sequence counts. The reason, and I'm going to make mention of that in a moment, but I'll leave total count here. So let's go ahead and run this in HTML and hope the lab plays nice with me. If it does not, I have a backup copy. Perfect. Okay, so what this should do is, again, for these 100 and some odd calls here, let's go ahead and open this up. So, and counting, of course. Okay, so for the 180 calls so far for the current day that have been of the inbound variety to my Zoom org here, here's the section that I built off of the Cradle-to-Grave logic itself. So I want to know how many calls went to the finance department, how many went to HR, how many went to retail sales. Now, certainly, again, this is me just picking on these three departments, kind of very high level, but I also want to know what are the sequence counts. Now, there is a difference between the total counts and the sequence counts. What is the difference there, Matt? I'm so glad you asked that, Jim. The difference between these two is the total counts are going to be are going to be clocked or counted for every representation where we see the finance department. Now, the granularity of all these calls are definitely baked down in here. So again, we can go ahead and click on any of these links over here on the right to jump down. So as an example here, if I look at the call department, which is what I'm filtering off of. So in this one example here, I've got 4 finances here. So that's what's inflating the total call count. But the ones that are flagged with the orange are going to be of the sequence count variety, and we're not going to double up on those counts. So there's plenty of finance, I'm sure, labeled all over HR. Yes, yes, yes. So that's why there is a difference between total count, which is going to count every row or every call leg or event, whereas the sequence counts are going to be very specific for each and every individual one sequence. So again, do not want to overinflate. So there's going to be a lot of times where we are going to recommend to use sequence count over total call count. So just want to make mention of that. If that was not straightforward and clear, certainly you can open a support ticket with us, or even reach out to me directly myself, and we'd be more than willing to have a discussion or even kind of a walkthrough on your system with this kind of logic. Now, having advantage of that and seeing all that, so again, yeah, so we can bake this into the reports pretty easily. We can build out, again, tertiary summary sections from the Cradle-to-Grave logic as well, and even have the granular nature of the details baked in here. However, maybe we don't. There is still obviously the option from, again, the call manager days where we can actually turn on the Cradle-to-Grave reporting. All of my filters are still here, but if I don't necessarily want to see the raw granular call details, I can suppress that and still get the luxury of the summary section coming from this logic in the output. So just as maybe one last example here, I'm going to go ahead and quickly run this. And again, this is going to provide that secondary or an additional summary layer of summarization. So again, whether or not the report needs to be this busy with pages after pages after pages, if that is unwarranted, don't get me wrong. This definitely I'm only running this for one day, 180 calls and counting so far out in the in the field in a live production system. These are going to be hundreds, if not thousands. So each and every one of these rows, including all of their daisy chain kind of Cradle-to-Grave sequencing, is also going to be embedded in the report. So you do have the luxury of being able to go ahead and turn those details off, but leveraging the output for what you define in the Cradle-to-Grave search set functions. So there's definitely a nice mixed bag there. And then maybe another example here of something I kind of put together yesterday, again, of more of inbound variety to like a dispatch location, let's say. 147 calls again, but 129 of full sequences. And the difference between these two, again, are going to be just some double counts from the sequences, from the Cradle-to-Grave sequences that we're not double counting. Now, again, being able to see all the data, digit style, durations, ring times, directions of call, all the usernames of where these calls are going to. So we're able to see those very easily, their departments, but also then again slide to the right. Then the availability to be able to see, that again, that logic, the Cradle-to-Grave functionality in here. This one maybe a little more short and sweet, let's just say, as far as an example. Pardon me. But we can see where calls are coming into the call queues and then then rolling over to the users. So that's pretty easy to go ahead and see, but there's no ambiguity. Now, in these examples here, it looks like I've only got maybe one or so users that are actually answering these calls. It may not be a broadcast. Actually, this is a great example. So here's an example of a call that comes into a call queue, but we see it ring. No, it goes one agent at a time. So in this environment, it looks like they were ringing Matt first. Matt didn't answer. Then it rang Lindsay. Lindsay didn't answer. And then finally, Alexis Roberts actually answers this call and entertains it for 1 minute and 8 seconds. Outside of having this logic built in, baked into Verify, you wouldn't necessarily know. Sure you could go ahead and leverage that this external number of 4703 dialed in numerous times around the same time frame, but you wouldn't be able to stitch them all together necessarily and find out exactly all the ebbs and flows. That again is the value add and the power behind the Cradle-to-Grave reporting logic that is bestowed upon Verify. Now, there's certainly things that I could drag us through for the next 4, 5, 10 minutes, but I don't think I should need to, because this logic has been around, with Verify for for such a long time with Call Manager. It's now finally here for Zoom, and it's definitely been waiting with eager anticipation. Let's just say so. Um, I'm willing to now open it up to questions. So, Jim, might there be any phenomenal questions from the attendees by chance?
I am not seeing any, Matt. You covered it so well. Nobody's got any questions.
Let's go with that.
Yeah.